Gopi Jana Palapa Kiri Paradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Palapa Giri Paradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Palapa Giri Paradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, Chapter 70, Text 6. Ata Pluto mi basi amale yata vidhi. Kriya kalapam parudhaya yashasi. Chakara Sanjo Pagamadhi Satamo. Utanalo Brahmajala Pavagyata. Ata Pluto mi basi amale yata vidhi. Kriya kala pamparudaya vashasi. Chakara Sandhyo Pagamadhi Satamo. Utanalo Brahma Jajapayagjatam. Ata Pluto mi basi amale yata vidhi. Kriya kala pamparudhaya vasasi. Chakara Sanjo Pagamadhi Satamo. Utanalo Brahma Jajapayagjatam. Please chant. Ata Pluto me basi amale yata vidhi. Kriya kalapam yarudaya vyasasi. Chakara Sanjo Pagamadi Satamo. Utamalo Brahma Jajapayagyatam. Ata Pluto me basi amale yata vidhi. Kriya kalapam parutaya vasasi. Chakara Sanjo Pagamadi Satamo. Tanalo Brahma Jajapayagyatam. Ata Pluto me basi amale yata vidhi. Kriya kalapam parudaya vasasi. Chakara Sanjo Pagamadi Patamo. Tamalo Brahma Jajapayagyatam. Ata plutoma pasyamale yata vidhi. Kriya kalapam parutaya vasasi. Chakara sanjo pagamadi satamo. Utamalo brahma jajapa vagyata. The word for word, aha. Then, sorry, I think my computer changes. To check. Aplutsaha, having bathed. Ambasi, in water. Amale, pure. Yatavidhi, according to Vedic rules. Kriya, of rituals. Kalapam, the entire sequence. Pandaya, Parudaya, after dressing. Vasasi, in lower and upper garments. Chakare, he executed. Sandhya Upagama, worship at dawn. Adi, and so on. Sattamaha, the most saintly of personalities. Uta, having offered oblations. Analaha, to the sacred fire. Brahma, the mantra of the Vedas, namely Gayatri. Jajapa, he chanted quietly. But speech, yata, controlling. And the translation for text 6 by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada is as follows. That most saintly of personalities would then bathe in sanctified water, dress himself in lower and upper garments, and perform the entire sequence of prescribed rituals, beginning with worship at dawn. After offering oblations into the sacred fire, Lord Krishna would silently chant the Gayatri mantra. And the purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, Sridhar Swami points out that since Lord Krishna was in the disciplic succession from Karya Muni, he offered oblations to the fire before sunrise. Thus, then he chanted the Gayatri mantra. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri-Yuta Parakamlam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Chai Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavana Vishabani Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Taribhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Padaswami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Okay, so my favorite commentary from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, coming from Sarata Darshini, he comments that, and these are his words, Krishna executed an entire sequence of rituals. And the word that was used was in the second line, the Kriya Kalapam. So that, or you could say this verse begins with Lord Krishna bathing in sanctified water. And in a similar manner, just thinking of persons that are worshipping Lord Krishna, a worshipper should also bathe the deity every day. So, deity of Krishna. So, in the same way, here the Krishna is bathing first thing in the morning in sanctified water. In a similar manner, a worshipper of Lord Krishna needs to bathe a deity of Lord Krishna in water, as opulently as his assets permit him to do. So he can use water scented, or she can use water scented with sandalwood, with ushira root, with camphor, with kumkum, and a guru. The worshipper should also chant various Vedic hymns, such as the Anuyaka, known as Svarna Garma. Another thing he can chant, or she can chant, is the Mahapurusha Vidya, the Purusha Shukta, and various songs of the Samavedas, such as the Rajana and Rohinya. So, in Pancharatrika Pradipa, which is the manual utilized by the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, particularly in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, there's an explanation given that there are various herbs that one can use to scent the Lord's bathing water. Because we're hearing Krishna wasn't bathing in regular water, it was sanctified water. So naturally the sanctification happens through the chanting of the mantras and also through the herbs that are placed in the water. So in the Pancharatrika Pradipa, it's explained that pujaris can commonly put a few drops of rose water, some fragrant flower petals into the bathing water. So the Purusha Shukta prayers, which is one of the prayers recommended that one could chant a hymn to sanctify the water, they commonly chanted when worshipping Shaligram Shila. So as a householder, I worship Govardhan Shila. So that's what I'm most familiar with, although I have done Radha Krishna worship in different temples. But in worshipping a Shila form of the deity, there is an offering of various items of worship. They're called upacharas. And these take the form of offering shoes to the Lord, welcoming him, offering water to wash his feet, offering water that he can sprinkle over his head, offering water to him to sip, offering a cup of madhuparka, cleaning. Then one can clean the deity form before his bath. So, for example, one can remove the sacred thread, one can remove a crown or any ornaments. And then, after that is done, one can offer items for cleaning his teeth. And for each of which, one shows an appropriate upachara mudra before offering the item. So you let the Lord know what it is that's coming, so you show a mudra before the item is offered. Now, Srila Prabhupada has recommended that pujaris chant the Brahma Samhita prayers when bathing deities. And in deity worship, the Lord is bathed by pouring water from a conch while chanting the Brahma Samhita prayers. So, for instance, one may chant Venum Kavantam Aravinda Dalai Taksham Bhavitam Sam Asatam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. And translated, that is, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept at playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head bedecked with peacock feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue rain clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. So that's the 30th verse of Sri Brahma Samhita. It's commonly chanted when bathing the deity. So in our text today, Lord Krishna was bathing in sanctified water. And that's, again, as I mentioned, that sanctification is the chanting of the Purusha Shukta prayers. Like in our deity worship, we chant the Brahma Samhita. And connected to the bathing, which usually is chanted silently, is a particular mantra that goes along with all the various offerings of water that are given to the deity, alongside the mudra that's indicating which item is to be offered. So there's a translation for one of the Purusha Shukta prayers connected to bathing. So I'm going to read the translation. The devatas, satyas, and rishis placed the Virat Purusha, the first being of the universe, on kusha grass and sprinkled him with water for purification. In this way, they conducted the mental sacrifice using the Virat Purusha. So that would be a Sanskrit mantra that's chanted. I've read the English version, that's connected to the bathing. Now, the next step for Lord Krishna was to dress himself in lower and upper garments. That's what we've just read. So his instruction, and this is very interesting, it comes in the 11th canto in the 27th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He gives a particular instruction on deity worship connected to this step in the whole process. And this is Krishna's instruction. My devotee should then lovingly decorate me with clothing, a brahmana thread, various ornaments, marks of tilak and garlands, and he should anoint my body with fragrant oils, all in the prescribed manner. So we heard something of the prescribed manner. Now, there's a specific note one can make that the Brahminical thread one is enjoined to give, because this is Krishna's instruction. It's often said that it can be of gold if possible. And there's also, this is coming from the Gautamiya Tantra, this particular mention of what the ideal Brahminical thread would be, a gold thread. And if one offers Lord Govinda yellow sacred thread, it should contain 3 strands of silk, because he will then become an expert in Vedanta. So just if you offer a Brahminical thread to the deity of Lord Krishna that has 3 strands of silk, then as the worshipper, the result is, according to the Gautamiya Tantra, one will become an expert in Vedanta. So in the commentary to this verse that I've read, where Krishna's giving the instruction of what to do after his bathing, namely the offering of clothing and tilak, anointing his body with fragrant oil, offering the Brahminical thread, there's a particular commentary and from the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, where they're drawing from Sridhar Swami, who did many commentaries on the Bhagavatam. And they say that there's a way that you can exemplify, or Sridhar Swami exemplifies, he gives an example of how you can have a loving mood towards Lord Krishna, because that was part of his instruction. My devotee should then lovingly decorate me. So here's how Sridhar Swami describes what that lovingly decorating Lord Krishna looks like. And this is coming from the Vishnu Dharma Upapurana. And here's what it says. Absorb your mind completely in the deity. You should give up all other shelter and consider the deity your intimate well-wisher. You should mentally worship him and meditate upon him while you walk, while you stand, while you sleep and eat. You should see the deity in front of you, behind, above, below, and on both sides. In this way, you should constantly remember my deity form. So that's to just paint the picture of having a loving mood towards the decoration of the deity, coming from Sridhar Swami, quoting from the Vishnu Dharma Upapurana. Now, of course, I've become aware personally through worshipping Govardhan Shila for many years that one gets surprised how deeply one starts to hold the deity in one's heart just because of performing the worship on a daily basis as a householder. So this description that I've just read, where you actually are able to meditate on the deity while you're walking, standing, sitting, eating, sleeping. Obviously, it's quite an advanced stage, but at least I've become aware that actually one starts to carry the deity within one's heart and as a very precious entity, one's shelter. So for the devotee, after bathing the deity form of the Lord, he or she can offer cloth for drying the Lord with the Mula mantra. And while doing so, one has to be careful not to touch the Lord's body with one's left hand. So that's one of those scriptural injunctions. And fragrant oil is smeared on the Lord's body to give the body a shine. So this is after the bathing, because if you look at a Shila, usually there's a slight sheen. This is the result of fragrant oil being applied after the bathing. Now, for a Shila, usually they're conch shell eyes that are affixed to the Shila. And then the deity, and then naturally there's a Mula mantra where you apply tilak after the conch shell eyes are affixed, and the deity is placed on his throne. It's then that there's the upachara of offering clothing. So there's a lot that leads up to before clothing is actually offered. So I've tried to describe that because we're hearing in this verse, Krishna bathes in sanctified water and then he's putting his upper and lower garments. So naturally, for a worshipper, there's quite a few steps prior to coming to that point of actually offering clothing, which is vastra. And it's done such that there may be, for a Shila, often there may be a lower cloth and some sort of shawl that's put around and behind the deity. And then water is offered for sipping. So always there's water, such an important element in the worship, with the Mula mantra again, and the sacred thread is offered. So if you look closely on a Shila, you'll always see there's the sacred thread for being able to chant the Gayatri mantra. And there's the upachara, that's offering of a crown and other ornaments. So notice the complexity. There's always one is shown a mudra and then one's offering an item, but with the appropriate mantra. And so then you have a dressed deity or dressed Sheila. Conch shell eyes, a crown, necklaces, the Gayatri thread sitting on his throne. Now, continuing with Lord Krishna's sequence of morning activities, there's mention being made of being most expert. And the word that was used was satama, being most expert. So he performed these Sandhya rites, these early morning rites, something here it's described very briefly. I've tried to give the picture of what happens because Krishna has asked for this, that as a worshipper, one is worshipping a deity of him, and then the procedures one goes through to come to the point of bathing and dressing him. And so Krishna is considered most expert in performing these Sandhya rites. Satama was the word used. And it's said that he chanted the Gayatri mantra silently. So this is normally how Gayatri mantra is done. It's internal. It's not said out loud. And Srila Prabhupada writes, so this is Srila Prabhupada writing from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just this little section. After his meditation, which we'd heard about in previous verse, the Lord would regularly bathe early in the morning with clear, sanctified water. Then he would change into fresh clothing, cover himself with a wrapper, and engage in his daily religious functions. Out of his many religious duties, the first was to offer oblations into the sacrificial fire and silently chant the Gayatri mantra. So that's Srila Prabhupada describing something of what we've just read. Now, in the commentary by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, mention was made, this was in today's verse, that Sridhar Swami says that this offering oblations into the fire, it's before sunrise. And why it's been done is because Lord Krishna is in the disciplic line from Kanya Muni. So, and then it's after that that he would chant the Gayatri mantra. So Srila Prabhupada explains it this way. Lord Krishna is the ideal householder. So he executed all his religious functions, or the religious functions of a householder, without deviation. So this is the life of a householder. So, one sees worship or doesn't see it because it's behind closed curtains in a temple room, but the same thing is going on in the home of a householder in this kind of way, and I've tried to describe at least from the deity that I'm worshipping. The mention of Lord Krishna being in the disciplic line from Kanya Muni, just this statement from it, one needs to note that for the Pancharatrika system of worship, which is very liberal because it allows anybody from any social order to worship the deity, provided the person is properly initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. So that's a criterion that needs to be met. So with regard to the mantras, Sri Uddhava had in fact inquired from the Lord. So this is noted in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He had asked, O master of the devotees, please explain to me the prescribed method of worshipping you in your deity form. What are the qualifications of those devotees who worship the deity? On what basis is such worship established? And what is the specific method of worship? There had been that question asked by Uddhava of Lord Krishna. And the explanation given in the Pancharatrika Pradipad, the manual for deity worship, is that the process of deity worship is learned in disciplic succession. So notice we heard here that what Krishna is doing is because he's coming in a disciplic succession. So that process of deity worship is learned in disciplic succession, from the spiritual master and his representatives. So with regard to the method, Lord Krishna tells Uddhava, and this is noted, I've drawn it from Pancharatrika Pradipa in volume 1. One should carefully worship me by selecting one of the 3 methods by which I receive sacrifice: Vedic, Tantric, or mixed. So that was Krishna's instruction for, how do you worship him? And the explanation that is given in Pancharatrika Vidhi is that there's a combination of Vedic and Tantric methods of worship. So this is what we're doing as Gaudiya Vaishnavas. We're drawing both Vedic and Tantric methods of worship. And it means that those methods of Vedic worship are directed to Lord Vishnu specifically. And those aspects of Tantra that are drawn are sattvika, meaning that they're in goodness. So the Vedic worship generally uses fewer but longer mantras compared to the Tantric, but they're more comprehensive procedures than in Tantric worship. And for Tantric worship, the mantras are taken from the Tantra Agamas, which are supplements to the Vedas that have been put together by various rishis. So the specific method of worship, or the authorized compendium of Pancharatrika Vidhi for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, is the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is compiled by Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami and edited by Srila Sanatana Goswami. So that's the authorized compendium that we follow to follow Krishna's instruction that one may draw from the Vedas, one may draw from the Tantra Agamas, or it may be a mixture. So we're doing a mixture, but it's basically the whole compendium has been put together by Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami and edited by Srila Sanatana Goswami in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. So with regard to the qualifications of devotees that worship the deity, Lord Krishna explains in Pancharatrika Pradipa. We get this. Now please listen faithfully as I explain exactly how a person who has achieved twice-born status through the relevant Vedic prescription should worship me with devotion. So Krishna introduces. He says, a twice-born person should worship me, the worshipable Lord, without duplicity, offering appropriate paraphernalia in loving devotion to my deity form, or a form of me appearing upon the ground, in fire, in the sun, in water, or within the worshipper's own heart. So there's different ways that Krishna is permitting that one may perform worship of him in a worshipable form. So for a person to achieve twice-born status, the person must receive initiation from a bona fide spiritual master and then be trained in sadachara, proper Vaishnava behavior. That's a qualification. There has to be proper Vaishnava behavior before one may worship the deity. And the spiritual master can recognize if one's, or when one's come to the point of proper Vaishnava behavior. So generally one will notice in the community of devotees that in the process of purification, there's a long period where it's very clear that the ego is very prominent in functioning. So there are arguments that break out between devotees and there's factions that are formed. All of this is not proper Vaishnava behavior. One has to rise above that. So when one is able to rise above all of that, purify themselves adequately, then one becomes qualified, considering that one's behaving like a Vaishnava and isn't engaging in that kind of way. Factions, arguments, he said this, she said that. Then one becomes qualified to receive second initiation. And it's the duty of the spiritual master to train the disciple in all aspects of Krishna consciousness, that he can worship the deity with the proper attitude, because it would be to one's detriment if one were, there's a shortage of persons in the temple, and so somebody's given initiation just to fill an empty spot, and the person doesn't have the proper attitude, then the offenses that will be committed to the deity naturally will have repercussions for a whole community. So, for his part, the disciple must sincerely inquire from the spiritual master how to act properly. So, one doesn't think of this, one generally thinks of oneself as like, pretty fine. But actually, there's a whole other level of functioning where one actually has to inquire from the spiritual master what would be the proper course of action in this circumstance. Because generally, persons tend to think that they're right. That's part of the ego, because their reality is as according to their perceptions. So this is how it is. Or in fact, one may even make inferences that make one believe the reality is this. So it's a duty of the disciple to inquire from the spiritual master what would be the correct course of action. Am I thinking correctly? Am I seeing correctly? So this becomes absolutely essential if one were to come to the point of worshiping the deity in a way that pleases the Lord. So Lord Krishna may be worshipped in a variety of forms. Mention was made of that, and or elements even, because it was mentioned he could be worshipped in water, in fire, in the sun. And for each of them, there's an appropriate paraphernalia that needs to be offered. So the Lord may be worshipped on the ground, we read that, by drawing a yantra in the earth, chanting various mantras, and offering water and flowers. So often, apparently, this practice is done by sannyasis. So it's a permissible form of worship of the Lord. The Lord may be worshipped in fire by performing a sacrifice, especially the Pancharatrika Nitya Homa or the daily fire sacrifice. So you don't see householders, doing a fire sacrifice in their home every day. But it is done in very large temples. And the Lord may be worshipped in the sun. So just by virtue of the fact that one's chanting the Gayatri mantra, one's worshipping the Lord in the sun. And one offers agriya. And the Lord may be worshipped in water by offering water oblations. So if one goes to India, one will see persons standing in sacred rivers, and they're taking a palmful of water from the river and offering it to Lord Krishna. So that's a perfectly in order form of worship. It's given by Lord Krishna as one of the ways that one may worship him through the elements, so through water. Or one may even worship the Lord in a suitable pot with upacharas, or even within one's own heart. So that's called manasa puja, worship within the mind. So naturally, one can understand that kind of worship within the mind has to be, it's only really possible with a completely purified mind. Because can you imagine trying and worship Lord Krishna in the mind, and then the mind moves into some thought about what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow, goes back to it's not it's so easy. So obviously it's more elevated personalities that can do worship within the mind. But of all acceptable methods of worship, worship of the Lord's deity form is considered the best. Because in this form, the Lord bestows his mercy by revealing his attractive qualities. One can actually come to see the beauty of Krishna. One can come to experience his kindness, his fulfillment of one's desires. And also because why it's the best form in which to worship the Lord is also because the worshipper can render the greatest variety of services to the deity. So in a temple, you see it on a big scale. There's a huge flower room downstairs. Many people are engaged in one aspect of deity worship connected to flower garlands, breaking petals apart for worship on big festivals. Um, but of all, uh, so these, one can say, are all easily performed. Now, in relation to the deity form. So coming full circle, there is Lord Krishna explaining, and this is, I've also drawn from Pancharatrika Pradipa. The worshipper should first purify his body, cleansing his teeth and bathing. So this is even before you begin. Then he should perform a second cleansing by smearing the body with earth and chanting Vedic and Tantric mantras. So you may wonder what's that. So apparently, before one's finally rinsed, one could apply a form of cleansing mud to the body and then rinse the body. And it's considered that the second cleansing or purification of the body is when one puts tilak on afterwards. So Krishna says, fixing the mind on me, one should worship me by the various prescribed duties, such as chanting the Gayatri Mantra at the 3 junctures of the day. Such performances are enjoined by the Vedas and purify the worshipper of reactions to fruitive activities. So that's what the crux of the matter is, why this is such an important means to neutralize reactions as a householder. It's done through the deity worship. And if one's qualified oneself and has taken twice-born status, then one is also chanting the Gayatri Mantra at the 3 junctures of the day, fixing one's mind upon Lord Krishna. And that, together with the deity worship, is purifying the worship of any reactions to fruitive activities. So, of course, here we heard Lord Krishna performing those Sandhya rites, those early morning rites. And Srila Jiva Goswami, he notes that Krishna is most expert in the activities of Dharma, like the Sandhya rites. And of course, we're hearing the instructions are coming from Lord Krishna of how to do it. So to encourage one's own following of the Lord's instruction, he makes this statement. This is Lord Krishna speaking. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. That's from Bhagavad Gita 3:31. So everything that I've described is part of the duty of the twice-born householder. And it needs to be done in the proper mood. So Krishna particularly says without envy. And this is what's going to free one from any reactions to one's activities as a householder. And that particular verse in 3:31, I'm going to read the Sanskrit. Yeme matamidam nityam anutishtanti manayaha Shraddhayanto nasuyanto muchante te pi karma bihi. And Srila Prabhupada reiterates this point. He says, the injunction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom. And therefore, it is eternally true without exception. So, I mean, that's a huge statement. It never changes. So this faith in the injunction of Lord Krishna permits that freedom from the bondage of the law of karma. And that's the essence of the householder's duty, which I've tried to paint a picture of based on Lord Krishna's beautiful example in the verse that we read today. So if there's any thoughts or additions, comments, queries.
I was just thinking on the example. I mean, as you explained it very nicely, the parallel that is there and the application that we have, we, we, the application that is being given to us by Vaishnava Acharyas on how to perform the morning duties of a householder as Krishna is, uh, is exemplified. Um, because in one sense, as we read the narrations of this chapter, it has to do a lot with the sadhana prescribed for householders in that particular time within the Vedic structure, the Vanashram Dharma, the whole um, social structure that was there, the Vedic structure. So one thing that I notice is, as you mentioned, one of the things that Krishna does is he offer, he worshipped through the fire, the oblation of the fire. It doesn't describe Krishna. I have to read a little further, but it doesn't describe Krishna as worshiping, a particular deity in the temple.
No.
Although, it's explained that, say, Nanda Maharaj, he worshipped Lord Narayana. So deity worship was part. In fact, deity worship is it was the prescribed, you know, deity worship was a prescribed form of worship during Tetra Yuga, during Dwapara Yuga. So, I'm wondering this. Of course, it's explained that as you run the parallel, Krishna is more or less doing that to himself. He's bathing himself, and later in the discussions with as you brought it out with Uddhava, he explains you should do this and you should do this for my deity form. So it's in other words, my comment is that it requires the guidance of the Vaishnavacharyas, otherwise it can be a bit, confusing. Then one applies, if we follow Krishna's example, not in principle, but imitate like that, then it can create, some big
Yes,
obstacles.
that's a very insightful point. There's 3 pages devoted in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Srila Prabhupada on one of the verses that came before this, where Krishna is sitting and meditating on himself. So Srila Prabhupada particularly, he pounds it for 3 pages. That it's not that now the householder meditates on himself. So that would be the imitation. And then Srila Prabhupada breaks it down into why there's a difference between the householder, the living entity, and Krishna. And he starts by pointing out that, the human being has to use a different limb to perform a different function, or a different organ of the body to perform a particular function. Krishna can, with any part of his body, perform any function. There's one major difference. So he begins, and it's several paragraphs. um, so, and he goes on, maybe pointing out 2 or 3 other differences between the living entity and Krishna. So that's a very good point. It's not that one is now in the controlling position and worshipping, meditating on oneself and worshipping oneself. That could be problematic. So even the manasa puja, meditating within the mind, I mean, it's very challenging. So clearly, it has to be a very purified person to be able to do that. So the deity form, an external, visible form of Lord Krishna, with his beautiful limbs, his beautiful body, his beautiful face that one can decorate. It's all allows for that understanding that one is a servitor of Lord Krishna, and one is performing actions for his pleasure. Um, and because it's the what he asked for as a prescribed duty, then he's experiencing satisfaction. Automatically, oneself is also experiencing satisfaction and happiness. So that's the beauty, that there's a sense of great happiness and satisfaction from performing that worship of a deity form of Lord Krishna, because he's prescribed that as a duty and he's completely satisfied with that duty being performed. If there isn't anything else, thank you very much for your very kind attention. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.